a really old castle. There's a lot of dangerous places within the castle, and if kids or adults go up there just to check it out, they're very likely to get hurt, and that's one of our biggest issues, public safety.
For most people, owning a castle is a dream worth killing for. Too bad you'd need to mortgage your soul just to cover the down payment. But here's the twist. Somewhere out there, real castles are selling for $1. One single dollar. And somehow, buyers are walking away. Why? Number 20. Kinloch Castle. Kinloch Castle is the kind of place that can look like a bargain on paper and still destroy the person who takes the keys. It sits on the Isle of Rum, a remote island in Scotland's Inner Hebrides. The setting is stunning. Red sandstone walls, grand rooms, old luxury, wild scenery, and the feeling that the whole place belongs to another world. It was built for Sir George Bullough, a wealthy industrialist who wanted a private island mansion filled with the best comforts of the early 20th century. For its time, Kinloch Castle was not ordinary at all. It had electricity, running water, expensive interiors, and rare features that showed how much money had been poured into it. But more than a century later, all that luxury has turned into a burden. The building has been in poor condition for years. The roof, walls, services, and historic rooms all need serious work. The former hostel inside the castle closed because of health and safety concerns, and the castle is not currently open to normal visitors. Even just keeping the building from getting worse costs a huge amount of money every year. And then comes the real problem: the island. Fixing a castle on the mainland is already expensive. Fixing one on the Isle of Rum is worse. Workers have to reach the island. Materials have to be shipped in. The weather can slow everything down. Accommodation, transport, and basic logistics become part of the repair bill. The restoration cost is expected to run into tens of millions of pounds. Number 19. Predjama Castle. Predjama Castle is built into a cave, which makes it one of the most incredible castles on Earth and one of the worst places to own. It stands in Slovenia, pressed into the mouth of a cliff that rises about 400 feet high. From the outside, it looks impossible. Stone walls sit directly against the rock, as if the castle grew out of the mountain instead of being built by people. It is more than 800 years old and is known as the largest cave castle in the world. Behind it is a cave system with hidden tunnels, cold passages, and dark spaces that once made the castle almost impossible to capture. The most famous story is tied to Erazem of Predjama, a rebellious knight who supposedly survived a long siege because the cave tunnels allowed supplies to reach him in secret. His enemies thought they had trapped him, but the mountain itself was helping him stay alive. In the end, the legend says he was betrayed by a servant and killed after his hiding place was revealed. That same cave setting is why ownership would be a nightmare. This is not a normal building on normal ground. It is part castle, part cliff, and part cave. The rooms can feel cold and damp. Moisture is always part of the battle. The cave system is also home to bats, and the rock itself limits what anyone can change. Number 18. Bannerman Castle. Bannerman Castle looks romantic from across the Hudson River, but up close it is a collapsing weapons warehouse dressed like a castle. It sits on Polypel Island in New York, standing in ruins above the water like something from a forgotten war movie. But this was never built for kings, queens, or peaceful island living. It was built by Francis Bannerman, a Scottish-born military surplus dealer who needed somewhere to store weapons, ammunition, and old army equipment. Around 1900, Bannerman bought the island because keeping that much military stock near the city was too dangerous. So he built a strange castle-like warehouse that worked as storage, advertisement, and personal fantasy all at once. The words Bannerman's Island Arsenal were even built into the walls, so passing boats and trains could see exactly who owned it. Then the dream started falling apart. Bannerman died in 1918. 2 years later, stored shells and powder exploded, damaging part of the complex. Later, the island became harder to use, the business faded, and the buildings were left behind. The worst blow came in 1969, when a huge fire destroyed most of what remained inside. After that, the castle was mostly empty walls. Today, it is still dangerous. Parts of the structure have collapsed, and steel supports hold up sections that could still fall. Visitors can tour the island, but they cannot walk inside the main ruins. Number 17. Houska Castle. Legend says Houska Castle was built over a gateway to hell. It stands in the Czech Republic, north of Prague, and at first it looks like a normal old Gothic castle, but the story around it is anything but normal. For centuries, people have said the castle was not built mainly to keep enemies out. It was built to keep something trapped underneath. The castle dates back to the 13th century, and even without the legend, its location feels strange. It was not placed on a major trade route. It did not sit in an obvious military position. It had no natural water source that would make it easy to survive a long siege. For a medieval castle, those are strange choices. According to local legend, there was once a deep hole in the ground beneath the site. People believed strange things came from it, and the castle's chapel was built over the opening to seal it shut. Whether anyone believes that or not, the story became impossible to separate from the castle. That is the problem for any owner. You would not just be buying old walls and a quiet country estate. You would be buying one of Europe's most famous dark legends. Every room, every cold draft, every sound at night would carry the same question people have asked for centuries. Was this castle built for people, or was it built to lock something away? Number 16. Castle Tioram. Castle Tioram sits on a tidal island so beautiful it looks unreal. But the inside is closed because falling stones could kill someone. It stands in Loch Moidart on Scotland's west coast, about 50 miles west of Fort William. At low tide, a causeway appears, and people can walk across to the island. At high tide, the sea cuts it off again. That alone makes it a nightmare to repair, manage, or own. Then there is the danger. The castle is a protected ruin, and visitors are not allowed inside because of the risk of falling stone. In 1998, the Highland Council issued a dangerous building order because of its poor condition. In 2000, part of the northwest curtain wall collapsed. Repairs were carried out, but the castle remained a fragile structure with a future nobody could easily solve. A private owner would not be free to do whatever they wanted with it either. Castle Tioram is a scheduled monument, which means major work needs special permission. Number 15. Castello Alimonda. Castello Alimonda was not built as a royal dream home. It became known because doctors used the place for electrotherapy. It stands in Sagrado, in northeastern Italy, near the Isonzo River. At first glance, it looks like a small castle with old-world charm, a square body, a rear tower, a raised entrance, and details that echo the grand style of nearby Miramare Castle. But its story is much stranger than its appearance. In the 1880s, the Alimonda brothers from Trieste created a medical center there for electrotherapeutic treatments. At the time, that sounded modern and advanced. Electricity was still exciting, mysterious, and full of promise. People believed it could help treat illness, and the castle became part clinic, part residence. Today, that past feels unsettling. After the Alimonda family, the building's purpose kept changing. During wartime, it was used as a military hospital and later as a prison. In 1982, the municipality of Sagrado acquired it, and it was restored for public use, including as a school. A person would not just be buying walls and rooms, they would be buying a former electrotherapy castle with a past that feels impossible to explain away. Number 14. Dunboy Castle and Puxley Mansion. Dunboy was supposed to become one of Ireland's most luxurious castle hotels, but the money ran out before the dream could fully come back to life. The site sits near Castletownbere in County Cork on the Beara Peninsula. It is not just one ruined building, it has two layers of trouble. First, there are the ruins of Dunboy Castle, an old O'Sullivan Bear stronghold that once guarded Bearhaven. In 1602, the castle was crushed during the siege of Dunboy, and the surviving defenders were executed after the battle. Then, centuries later, Puxley Mansion was built nearby. It became a grand home connected to the wealthy Puxley family, but it also ended in ruin. During the Irish War of Independence, the mansion was burned and left as a shell for decades. That should have been enough warning. But in the 2000s, the site was given one more chance. Developers tried to turn the mansion into a luxury resort, with the kind of high-end hotel plan that was supposed to pull wealthy visitors to the coast. The project was huge. It was reported as a €50 million restoration, one of the biggest of its kind in Ireland. Then the money dried up. Workers were laid off, the project stopped, and the mansion was left around 90% complete. Dunboy is scary for buyers because someone already tried the big dream, spent big money, got close, and still got stuck. Number 13. Chateau de Rochefort. Chateau de Rochefort was sold for €1 because the real price was keeping it from falling apart. It sits in Burgundy, France, hidden near Asnières-en-Montagne. The place is old, rare, and beautiful in a ruined way. The first stronghold on the site may go back to the 12th century, and the castle that remains today is one of France's rare traces of the pre-Renaissance period. The site has two main parts: the entrance buildings, which were still lived in until 1956, and the lordly residence with 6 towers, which survived more than 2 centuries without roofs or floors. That alone tells you how serious the damage is. Rain, wind, frost, and plants had years to attack the walls from inside and outside. By 2015, the French state demanded urgent conservation work. The owners challenged the order in court and lost. In 2017, the family sold the castle to the association Les Clefs de Rochefort for €1. But the low price was only the doorway into the real cost. The lordly residence alone needs more than €850,000 in work, with an urgent first phase of €280,000 just to save key walls, chimney flues, and a major fireplace. If that work is not done, part of the castle will simply disappear. Number 12. Leap Castle. Leap Castle is said to be haunted, but not just because people claim to hear footsteps in the dark. It has a chapel, a murder story, and a hidden chamber where bodies were thrown and forgotten. It stands near Roscrea in County Offaly, Ireland. And from the outside, it looks like a strong medieval tower built for power, not comfort. Leap Castle was never a soft fairy tale home. It was tied to clan fights, family violence, and stories so dark that they still follow the castle today. The most famous story comes from the Bloody Chapel. After the death of Mulrooney O'Carroll in 1532, a power struggle broke out inside the O'Carroll family. Legend says one O'Carroll brother walked into the chapel while his priest brother was saying Mass and murdered him at the altar. But the chapel is only part of the horror. Inside the castle, workers later found an oubliette. That was a hidden drop chamber where prisoners could be pushed through a hole and left below with no real way out. The story says the chamber contained human skeletons piled on top of wooden spikes, and that it took 3 cartloads to remove the remains. The castle was also burned in 1922 and later restored. So people may want to visit Leap Castle because it is terrifying. But living there would mean sleeping inside one of Ireland's darkest stories. Number 11. Ribbesford House. Ribbesford House proves that a cheap historic mansion can still cost millions and leave the owner burned. It sits near Bewdley in Worcestershire, England, and it looks like the kind of place people dream about owning. It has a long history, a large estate, and the kind of old English character that makes buyers think they have found a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. But Ribbesford was never a simple bargain. The house is Grade 2-star listed, which means it is protected because of its historic importance. That sounds impressive, but for an owner it also means strict rules. You cannot just tear things out, modernize everything quickly, or fix it like a normal house. Every serious change becomes slower, more expensive, and more controlled. When it sold in 2018, the dream looked huge. It had about 20 bedrooms, a large plot, and the kind of scale that made people see profit. The buyers paid more than £800,000 and planned to bring it back to life. Then the building fought back. It had already been divided into flats, and its condition was worse than expected. The restoration took years. Costs climbed far beyond the first plan. Around £3 million was spent trying to save it, including major work to make the building watertight and protect it from further decay. And after all that, the property was later sold for £450,000. Number 10. Chateau de la Rochepot. Chateau de la Rochepot looks like a perfect Burgundy fairy tale, but its recent history reads more like a crime case than a real estate story. It stands in eastern France, surrounded by wine country with towers, thick stone walls, and the famous patterned roof tiles that make Burgundy Castle so easy to recognize. From the outside, it looks like the kind of chateau people would dream of owning. Then the modern nightmare began. The chateau became linked to Ukrainian businessman Dmitry Malinovsky, who was accused of faking his own death and using money from a major fraud to buy the property. The case involved allegations of money laundering and a fraud worth more than 12 million euros. In 2018, police arrested him near Dijon. Authorities seized assets connected to the case, including the chateau, a vintage Rolls-Royce, and Salvador Dali artworks. For years after that, the castle was trapped in legal uncertainty. Court cases, appeals, confiscation, and public concern turned this beautiful property into a legal headache. In 2026, the confiscation of the chateau was confirmed, and the building was set to be sold by the state. A future owner would inherit a protected landmark, restoration pressure, public attention, and a recent scandal that people will not forget. Number 9. Pidhirtsi Castle. Pidhirtsi Castle was once one of the grandest residences in Eastern Europe, but today its beauty comes with looting, fire damage, slow restoration, and the weight of war. It stands in western Ukraine about 50 miles east of Lviv. From the outside, it looks more like a palace than a battlefield. It has a grand front, strong walls, a moat, a drawbridge, and wide views over the valley below. But it was built as both things at once, a rich palace protected inside a fortress. Construction began in the 1630s for Stanislaw Koniecpolski, one of the most powerful military leaders of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. At its height, this was not just a castle with stone walls. It had rich rooms, gardens, vineyards, an apiary, a trout pond, a mill, and even a private zoo. Its wine was so famous that poets wrote about it. Then the damage started stacking up. The castle was attacked, looted, and damaged through wars and political change. During the First World War, Russian troops took many valuables and damaged the interiors. Later, more of its collection was scattered across museums and private hands. After the Second World War, Soviet authorities turned the castle into a tuberculosis sanatorium. Then, in 1956, a fire burned through the building for weeks and left much of it gutted. By 1997, the ruined castle was handed to the Lviv National Art Gallery, and restoration began slowly. Anyone who bought it would inherit a restoration project far bigger than any one owner could manage. Number 8. Bronx Stone Castle. One of the strangest castles on this list is not hidden in Europe. It is sitting in the Bronx. The house stands at 4720 Grosvenor Avenue in New York City, in the Fieldston area of Riverdale. It was built in 1926 and designed by Frank Forster as a French-style stone castle. That already makes it unusual, but the wildest part is the stone itself. The walls are about 30 inches thick, and the stone was reportedly cut from the ruins of a Croatian castle. The original owner was connected to a shipping line, and the stones were brought across the ocean as ballast on ships. Inside, the house has a sunken living room, a huge stone fireplace, beamed ceilings, wood details, a library, old-style windows, and thick walls that make it feel far older than the city around it. It sounds amazing, but that is also where the problem starts. This is not a normal luxury home. It is too specific, too unusual, and too different from what many New York buyers expect. The layout, stone walls, historic details, maintenance, taxes, and resale worries all shrink the buyer pool. Number 7. Gwrych Castle. Gwrych Castle became famous on television, but the cameras arrived after decades of damage had already turned it into a roofless shell. It stands near Abergele in North Wales, looking over the Irish Sea from a huge estate of gardens, walls, towers, and broken rooms. From a distance, it looks like the kind of castle people would rush to own, but anyone who looked closer would see the real problem. This was not a simple old mansion. It was a massive rescue job. The castle was built between 1812 and 1822 by Lloyd Hesketh Bamford Hesketh as a memorial to his family. It had grand rooms, Gothic windows, a library, a drawing room, a music room, and a marble staircase that became one of its most famous features. For years, it was a showpiece. Then, the decline came. After it stopped working as a major attraction, the building was neglected, stripped, vandalized, and damaged by fires. Rooms lost their roofs, floors disappeared. That is why private ownership became so difficult. Gwrych Castle is Grade 1 listed, so it cannot just be repaired any way someone likes. Every serious fix has to respect the building's history, and that makes everything slower, harder, and more expensive. Number 6. Chateau de la Mothe Chandonnier. Chateau de la Mothe Chandonnier looks like a castle people would fight for, but saving it was too heavy a burden for one owner to carry. It sits in western France surrounded by water, broken stone, open windows, and trees growing right through the ruins. From the outside it looks magical. Up close it is the kind of dream that can swallow a fortune. The oldest parts of the chateau go back to the 13th century. It survived wars, was taken more than once in the Middle Ages, and was badly damaged during the French Revolution. Later, it was restored into a romantic country chateau, with towers, a moat, gardens, and the kind of look that makes people stop scrolling. Then, in 1932, disaster hit. A fire tore through the building and destroyed much of the chateau. After that, it sat abandoned for decades. Rain came in, plants spread across the walls, trees grew where rooms used to be. The damage became part of the beauty, but it also made the castle a nightmare to rescue. That is why this place was not saved by one wealthy buyer walking in with a clean plan. In 2017, it was rescued through crowdfunding, and today, tens of thousands of people from around the world share ownership in the project. Number 5. Castello di Sammezzano. Castello di Sammezzano may be one of the most beautiful castles in Europe, and that is exactly why it is such a terrifying property to take on. It stands near Florence, in Tuscany, and from the outside it already looks unusual. But the real shock is inside. The rooms are filled with bright arches, carved walls, painted ceilings, tiled patterns, and colors that make the place feel almost unreal. It is not the kind of building you can repair with normal paint, normal tiles, and normal workers. The castle's famous look came from Ferdinando Panciatici Ximenes d'Aragona, who transformed the estate in the 19th century into a massive Moorish-style fantasy. He poured his obsession into the building, using local craftsmen to create rooms that do not look like anything else in Italy. That is what makes Sammezzano so valuable. It is also what makes it dangerous. For years, the castle was stuck in neglect, failed auctions, ownership problems, and abandoned plans. Buyers came close, deals collapsed, and public campaigns kept begging for the building to be saved. Even when it was offered at auction, the price was only the beginning. The real problem was the money needed after purchase. A building this detailed cannot be fixed cheaply. Every damaged arch, painted surface, window, ceiling, and tiled room needs careful work. The estate also comes with a huge historic park, so the burden is not just the castle walls, it is the whole property. Number 4. Chateau Miranda. Chateau Miranda was so expensive to save that its story ended with demolition. It once stood in Celle, in Belgium's Ardennes region, looking like the perfect abandoned fairy tale castle. Tall towers, sharp roofs, Gothic windows, empty halls, and a huge clock tower made it one of the most famous abandoned castles in Europe. Photographers and urban explorers loved it because it looked almost unreal. But behind that beauty was a building nobody could afford to keep alive. The castle was designed in the 19th century by English architect Edward Milner for the Liedekerke-Beaufort family. Construction began in 1866, but the building was not fully completed until 1907. Later, after the family left, it became known as Chateau de Noisy and was used as a holiday home for children connected to Belgium's railway company. By 1991, the castle was abandoned. The cost of maintenance had become too much, and efforts to find investors failed. After that, the damage came fast. Fires hit the building, the roof suffered badly, ceilings started collapsing, vandals and trespassers moved through the rooms. The same decay that made it famous online also made it harder to rescue. People wanted it saved, but wanting a castle and paying to save one are two very different things. The building had become too unstable, too expensive, and too far gone. Demolition began in 2016 and was finished in 2017. Number 3. Schloss Reinhardsbrunn. Schloss Reinhardsbrunn was neglected for so long that the state of Thuringia finally stepped in and took the castle away. It sits in Germany near Friedrichsrode, surrounded by the Thuringian forest. At first glance it looks peaceful, with pale walls, towers, a chapel, and a large park around it. But appearances can be deceiving. The site itself goes back more than 900 years. A monastery once stood there, and the later palace was built in the 19th century on that historic ground. That gives Reinhardsbrunn a heavy past. It is not the kind of building someone can buy and casually redesign. It carries religious history, royal history, local pride, and legal protection. For years, the castle was left to decay. Windows were boarded. Parts of the estate needed emergency care. The building became a public embarrassment because something so important was being allowed to rot. After the state took control, the rescue still did not become simple. Millions of euros have already gone into securing and restoring parts of the site. But saving the walls is only the beginning. Someone still has to decide what the castle should become, how the public should use it, and who will keep funding it year after year. Number 2. Chillingham Castle. Chillingham Castle is not the kind of place people avoid because it is ugly. They avoid it because it is famous for being one of England's most haunted castles. It stands in Northumberland, close to the border between England and Scotland, where castles were not built for comfort. They were built for danger. Chillingham began as a medieval stronghold, and its history is tied to border fighting, noble families, prisoners, dungeons, and violence that lasted for centuries. That past is now part of the castle's attraction. Visitors come for the grand rooms and gardens, but many come for the darker side. Chillingham has ghost tours, dungeons, a torture chamber, and stories that have made the place a magnet for paranormal fans. The castle's most famous spirits include the Blue Boy, Lady Mary Berkeley, and the White Pantry Ghost. Whether people believe every story or not, the reputation is now impossible to remove. That sounds useful for tourism, but it would be a strange thing to own privately. Every noise in the night already has a story attached to it, and every cold room or dark hallway comes with visitors expecting something terrifying to happen. Then there is the legal side. An owner cannot simply rip things out, modernize it quickly, or treat it like a normal luxury house. Repairs have to respect the history, and that makes everything slower and more expensive. Number 1. Kimball Castle. Kimball Castle had the view, the history, and the fairy tale shape, but nobody saved it before fire finished the job. It stood on a hill in Guilford, New Hampshire, overlooking Lake Winnipesaukee. From that position, it had almost everything a dream castle should have: a dramatic setting, stone walls, a forest around it, and a wide view over the water. It was built in 1894 for Benjamin Ames Kimball, a powerful railroad businessman. Kimball had seen castles along Germany's Rhine River and wanted his own version in New England. So he built a stone summer estate that looked medieval, even though it was really a rich man's private retreat. But years later, the dream became a problem nobody could easily solve. The building fell into serious disrepair and became unsafe. The town condemned it, and for years its future was stuck between restoration, redevelopment, and demolition. The biggest issue was not just the damage. It was also what the property could legally become. Old restrictions made the buyer pool painfully small. A future owner could not simply turn it into anything they wanted. Plans were tied to ideas like a 40-room inn and a 75-seat restaurant. Other uses would have needed more approvals, more money, and more patience. At one point, officials said saving it would take something like a $10 million rescue. Without that kind of money, demolition kept hanging over the property. Then, in August 2025, the castle caught fire before sunrise. The roof, floors, and ceilings collapsed, and officials described the structure as a total loss. Thanks for watching. Now check out the videos popping up on screen for more unbelievable stories.